Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the August 13th Concord Select Board meeting. The meeting is open to the public and is being televised by CCTV live and rebroadcast. We have a quorum present. We also have selected for Linda Esposito participating remotely by telephone. And a few comments regarding this process. First, used it. The procedure we follow is permitted by the open meeting law regulations at 940 CMR 29 and was adopted on January 7th, 13. Linda notified me over a month ago that she had family obligations, unable to physically attend the meeting due to significant geographic. We notified Andrew Mara, who has made the necessary arrangements, required to inquire if any party or person attending has any obligation to Linda's remote participation. Seeing none, we will proceed. Linda shall be counted as present for the meeting and may vote as if she were present. However, all votes taken during any meeting in which a member participates remotely will be by roll call vote. With that, proceed to the consent agenda. We have the town accountant warrants, gift acceptance of Concord Carlisle Community Chest, $17,090.50, the count aging gift account, and the Concord Carlisle Community Chest, $15,206 to the Community Service Coordinator account. Obviously, we're extremely appreciative of those gifts. We have one-day special licenses, Gaining Ground on September 9th from 3 to 5 p.m., 341 Virginia Road, Wine and Malt. Concord Carlisle Youth Hockey on October 13th, 5 p.m. to 11 p.m. at 246 Road to 9 Acre Corner, all alcohol. Salt Box Farm on August 29th, 6 to 9 p.m. 40 Westford Road, Wine and Malt. Fidelity Investments, August 30th, September 6th, 12th, 13th, 19th, 20th, 26th, from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. at 40 Westford Road, Wine and Malt. And Augustine Leona on August 25th from 12 p.m. to 4 p.m., 11 Wheeler Road, Wine and Malt. Motion to accept.
I move to approve the consent agenda as read.
Second.
And Linda, your vote?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all. And now, town manager report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Public Works Department had a pre-construction meeting with the contractor, the general contractor for the Cambridge Turnpike project on Friday, and got the schedule. You'll be seeing them put out siltation control, hay bales, and so forth in the next week or two, and construction will start the first week of September. And it will eventually result in some traffic delays, lane closures, everything. Try to keep the lane closures to non-commuting hours, but you're going to see construction happen at long last. Walden Street parking lot was topped off. Still some plantings to be done and some finish work. For the most part, the Walden Street lot is reconstructed, and they're working on the Kais Road lot now. The intersection of Main Street at Commonwealth Avenue, the work is continuing there. You can now see the shape of how the turning movement will work, and the contractor is committed to having that work done before Labor. And they seem to make progress on that schedule. Assistant Town Manager reported that 2 responses were received in response to the RFP for a caretaker of the Harrington House, a resident of Concord and a resident of Arlington. So the 2 proposals will be evaluated and a recommendation will be made. You'll notice we have new audio and video equipment installed in this room and in the hearing room, so hopefully that improves the quality of the signal that you see on cable television as well as the audio. The environmental bond bill, we received notice from Senator Barrett's office that the environmental bond bill was passed by the legislature and signed by the governor and included some major funding for projects for and Concord, including the Giroux funding, $300,000 for Giroux Park, and $600,000 for a co-generating heating system for the Beatty Center. But we're obligated to try to press our legislators to fund those projects. We've got the authorization in the bond bill. We have to make sure the funding staff had a review of the 36-unit planned residential development, or PRD, at 1450 Main Street last week, and had a lot of concerns. They are proposing to clear cut the entire property and remove thousands of cubic yards of fill, really change the site, and then rather densely develop the site. So there's a lot of concern about the current design as it's submitted. The planning board will be formally reviewing that planned residential development at its meeting on September 11th in the Harvey Wheeler Community Center. We've received a lot of complaints in the last couple of weeks about Verizon service, drop calls, incomplete transmissions, and so forth. The board has received emails and written correspondence. I also heard from public safety folks that they were also experiencing increased dropping of calls, lack of connection. So Kate Hodges, the assistant town manager, met with Verizon officials today, and they are available to speak with you on September 24th, Monday, September 24th, if that's agreeable. So I think we need to find a solution to this poor service that we have in Concord Center.
Just coincidental that it
You're not the first one to ask that, but you'll have an opportunity to ask the Verizon folks. It did show up. It began occurring shortly after the board made its decision not to.
Well, I just wanted to inject that in addition to the many complaints, we did have one citizen call in, and while also pointing out his need to drive to Bedford to make his calls, he did offer to serve on any kind of committee or effort that the town might engage. It's always helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And the service in Carlisle Center is great, I understand. Let me see, the Giroux planning process, the assistant town manager is coordinating the selection of Greenman Peterson, GPI, as a consultant to assist us with that process. And the first of two forums will be held on August 28th, which I think is a Friday. Is that correct? 28th at 5:30, from 5:30 to 7 p.m. on the, and there's a handout there, on the site. So the public is invited to walk the site with the consultant and provide feedback.
So this is the 28th at 5?
5:30.
5:30, and that's, what's the address?
On the site,
So for
which is
people that-
369 Commonwealth Avenue. And and that's the first of two. The second one, I think, is September 17th, and that will be at the townhouse, in the hearing room at the townhouse. But the public's invited to participate in the planning process because it is a rare opportunity to plan a park from scratch, so as much public input as possible is wanted. Our facilities department is inspecting the Giroux house this week to explore whether the house can be reused, as has been proposed by some housing advocates, or it would be better to recycle. If we did recycle a house, demolish and recycle it, we probably would get about 92% recycling, as was the case with the Anderson house on Lawsbrook Road. The Natural Resources staff asked to remind folks that the October Farm Riverfront parking area off Balls Hill Road will be closed for this week and next week, but open on the weekends as they construct parking for 6 vehicles. So the weekdays for the next 2 weeks, but open on the weekends. And lastly, the mandatory water use restrictions. The Public Works Commission approved a state of water supply conservation and a mandatory restriction to 1 day a week watering. We have taken the Nagog Pond filtration plant offline. We came very close to tripping the waiver that we have on raw water quality in the pond, and as a result decided to shut the plant off so that we could use it next summer as we ramp up towards replacing the plant with a new plant. But it does mean that we're pumping around 3 million gallons a day, and if one of our groundwater wells was to have a pump failure or other problem, we would be in difficulty. So to be proactive and cautious, the Public Works Commission is asking folks to cut back watering just once a week, which with all the rain we're having shouldn't be too much of a hardship.
The once a week date is the date of the garbage collection?
It's the day for your neighborhood. It is the date, whether you participate in the town's trash collection program or not, the day that you're allowed to water is the day when trash is collected in your neighborhood by the town.
And is that request or advice given also to the Acton residents that we're now pumping to as well?
I
On 2A?
believe they're, all of our customers, yes.
All of our
The-
customers. I'm just saying, because
the-
it doesn't.
The rule applies to
it wouldn't
all
apply
customers. Yep.
the same
The trash collection, fair enough.
Right.
They're mostly commercial customers on 2A and Acton, but a good point. I'll check on that. But yeah, I believe the rule applies to all customers.
Right.
So it just underscores, I think, the importance of getting the Nagog Pond filtration plant, approved and built.
This is, at this stage, voluntary?
No, it is mandatory. It is mandatory. The enforcement will be soft at the outset while if we continue to have rainy weather, but the reinforcement would be ramped up if we began to
The
get it.
issue we had before, when we had this was automatic sprinkler.
Right.
Yes.
I'm still concerned about that. I've seen them going off in the rain.
So that is a difficult question because they don't most of those in-ground systems have their own well. And so the question is, every time it comes up, is should people who have in-ground their own wells also be subject to the same water ban? Because
It's the same water.
comes from aquifer. No, there's more than one aquifer, but when you drain the aquifer, you also drain the supply. So,
Who makes that decision? Is that something that we could?
At the moment, we don't regulate private wells like that. The Board of Health does approve private wells for separation from septic systems and so forth, but other than that, the operation, you could, and some towns do.
And it would be a town meeting action,
I think it would be a bylaw.
a bylaw.
So it might be something worth considering.
Yep. The Water Department is on record as hoping that they're not required to regulate private wells as well as the public water supply. They have enough challenges with the public water supply. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Linda, do you have any questions?
No, thank you.
Anybody else have? I'm just wondering, the funding of the bond bill, the timing of that. You said that, I gather that has to get funded by the legislature, so we're talking probably a year?
I suppose that in the new session, when the new session starts, yes.
After Labor Day.
Thank you. Chair's report. As Chris mentioned, the past couple of weeks, we received a number of emails regarding the dropped cell phone calls. A couple of these emails indicated the calls were related to public safety issues. It's also come to our attention that lack of cell phone connections is a concern of the police and fire departments. I also raised this issue at the Disability Commission meeting on August 9th. They also indicated that they were aware and concerned about this problem. When the board last considered the issue of siting a cell phone tower to provide proper coverage, I indicated that I could not support Verizon's proposal as there was considerable concern about the health implications of any cell tower on families within the range prohibited by the local bylaw. The opposition was measured and rational, and there was no vocal support for implementing a cell tower that might pose a health risk. We're now confronted with the balancing of health risk of not allowing a cell antenna sufficient to provide adequate communications should the need arise to contact emergency personnel. We need to all acknowledge that Concord is very fortunate to have extraordinary police, fire, and emergency personnel. The Select Board is a repository of citizen complaints regarding town government and services, and during my tenure, I've only heard praise for these departments. Unless we can contact them in times of need, it does little good to have such excellence. We need to provide a solution to this problem, and that solution may be the proper siting of a cell antenna. In the category of the wag of the tail, I want to acknowledge that a town citizen who noticed that some of the retail stores in town did not have numbers on their property. He contacted me concerning that lack of numbering of properties could result in a delay in town emergency personnel being able to respond to the correct address. The building inspector has been following up and notifying these property owners that there is a statute, Chapter 148, Section 59, requiring the proper numbering on buildings. The failure to proper number has often resulted in building renovations or neglecting to replace the numbers, but it serves a good reminder that we all should check to be sure that our property is clearly marked so police, fire, and ambulance service can readily locate our homes and businesses.
Is there a site on the house? Is there a form that,
It doesn't, it just says it needs to be.
Okay. yep, readily seen?
Yeah. And I just think individuals, everybody's self-interest to make sure that it's done in a way that it can be seen from the street. Last point I would make is just, there will be no chairs breakfast this coming Wednesday, and that I gather the policy or the tradition is that during August, since there are very few committees meeting, we don't have a chairs breakfast, but I wanted to make sure that people didn't show up expecting to get coffee and coffee cake. And with that, we will open a public hearing, change of alternate manager, Paparazzi Trattoria of Concord, Inc., doing business as Paparazzi, located at 768 Elm Street. I have
Move to open the public hearing.
Second?
Linda, you vote?
Yes.
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 Aye, or, yes.
Aye.
Is there somebody here from Paparazzi? Not seeing, I think we do have all the documents, and there was, I know,
Chief O'Connor offered.
right, a police memorandum indicating that they've done an investigation and there's no information that would prohibit Eric Sheehan from assuming the role of alternate manager of record. And all the other documents seem to be in order, so I don't know whether we need to have them come and.
Never been in that situation of
Yeah.
not having the applicant appearing.
Right.
And at least telling us about his background or telling us his experience, whether he's served safe.
They were a
We-
little,
We were gonna put them last meeting and they requested to go to the next one, so maybe it was a 2-week
Continue
delay.
until your next meeting and ask him to come in, so
I
you can
think
meet
that
him.
would make
It is
sense.
customary.
I would feel more
Is that the
comfortable.
time
Yeah,
you were
the
thinking we were
individual.
not gonna
Yeah.
have this meeting?
Am I correct that Paparazzi in Concord, I think, you can tell me if I'm wrong, uses this as a training site? They're one of their better sites? Is that right? And that
I know that
they,
the managers and the assistant managers do move around.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is a training site.
I
but
think
they
I
do.
remember that from a
Encourage.
previous change of manager. Yeah.
I'm not, I think, but I can't recall exactly.
Yes. At your March 13th meeting, they noted that in 2017 that a lot of people trained there and then
Which is
go-
one of the reasons they moved the
Right.
manager of record. so
And that was the last
so-
time that you guys did the change of manager and alternate manager
Yeah.
for that
And
location.
they know about this and they've sent people in the past, so it's sort of surprising that nobody's here.
And I would just note for the record that we had them scheduled at 7:05 and it is now 7:18, so we're not jumping the gun on them. They've had plenty of time.
I'll speak to their manager of record, Brian Parkin.
So we,
Move to continue this
Yeah.
hearing to our next meeting, because
Maybe
that's,
first, see if the public has
Yeah.
anything to say, and then close the public hearing, and then, move to continue it.
does the public have anything they would like to comment on? Not seeing or hearing any, we're now in a position
I
to.
move to continue the public hearing until August 20th,
27.
or 7th, sorry.
I second.
Linda?
Aye.
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 Okay.
Well, Linda sets the tone, it's aye or yes. Keeping us on
We
our-
follow you happily,
keeping us on
Linda.
our toes.
Okay, now we have the CCTV update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You indicated that the board would like to have an update on what's transpired. So going back a little bit in history, I notified the CCTV board last November that I would not be continuing their contract with the town upon its expiration on September 30th, 2018. A petition article was submitted to town meeting, and the town voted to not support the town taking over the PEG access services. As a result of that, my intention was I asked the Assistant Town Manager, Kate Hodges, to negotiate an extension of the CCTV contract from its expiration date on September 30th through July 1st, so that we can convert them to a fiscal year, and then any contracts going forward would be on a fiscal year basis. And it was my intention through the spring and summer to issue a request for proposals from vendors, including CCTV would be invited in January or February, sometime this winter, to solicit proposals from vendors interested in providing the PEG access services. And I was planning to ask the Assistant Town Manager to submit a proposal whereby the town would provide those services, and the Select Board would have the opportunity to evaluate the proposals with the advice of the PEG Access Advisory Committee. So that was our plan throughout the summer. Kate had several meetings with the CCTV board to negotiate that 9-month extension. And then we did hear that one of their 5 employees providing service in Concord and Carlisle had announced his plans to leave in September. And then a couple of weeks ago, we heard that a second member of their team departed abruptly. And so I sat down and met with them and asked them candidly if they felt like they were going to be able to field a team on October 1st, adequate to provide the services that we're accustomed to. Kate and I met with the chair and vice chair, Sid Levin, and Neville Webb, and came to, I think they recognized that they were going to have a problem. They had trouble recruiting board members for a year or so. They've had difficulty getting folks to sit on the board. And they felt they would be having difficulty finding new employees and meeting their stated goals and their performance standards going forward, and under these difficult circumstances where the contract was only going to be extended by 9 months or so, bringing people in who may or may not have a job after 9 months was going to be a challenge. So we did agree that the best thing to do would be to part ways. The plan is for the town to operate the PEG access service for a year or two to stabilize the situation and get things set up and running the way we'd like them to run. And then I would imagine after that, the board would be interested in issuing a request for proposals to have third-party vendors come in. But I think it was a situation where the staff was leaving. There was not likelihood of replacement. We were having considerable trouble keeping track of the finances. We were getting invoiced for 100% of the cost, not the 80%, less the Carlisle contribution. So we were constantly correcting the financial statements that we were receiving. Things didn't add up, and it was a growing concern of mine that we were invoiced in a time when their staff had dipped down. We were invoiced more than we had been invoiced the previous month, and things like that were happening. That was causing me concern that they just didn't have the horsepower to manage the finances of the operation in addition to providing the services.
And they came to that realization.
I think that's right.
Do you have any questions, Linda? Do you have anything you'd like to ask or comment?
Was that directed to
I said, do you have any questions or comments you'd like to add?
No, not at this time.
Anybody,
No, I
Appreciate that update.
Yeah.
So, and I'll just mention that Kate is in the process of, had conversations last week with 2 of the 3 remaining employees, and we'll be speaking, I think, with the 3rd employee shortly, if not already. And so we're talking with the existing CCTV employees to see if they're willing to continue working for us. And Erin, Stevens, our public information officer, will have a role to play in managing the PEG access services. We do have the committee now up and running, so they can.
And the committee's been apprised of all of this.
Through Erin and Kate, I believe,
Right.
yes. Yep. And they're meeting Wednesday this week at 8 o'clock in the morning. So it's an unfortunate situation. I will mention going forward, CCTV has never had a lease with the regional high school for the studio space, and that would be a priority of ours is to get a written agreement between the schools and the town on the use of that space. And I know that the superintendent has expressed some concern about having town contractors working in a school building, folks that the schools haven't necessarily vetted, and I think should like to take a look at that. So those are some of the things that we're working on. We have a special town meeting scheduled for October 1st, so that's the first day the town will be operating the service, so we're gearing up to be ready for the town, live cable cast of the town meet special.
Trial
town
by
meeting.
fire.
Anybody in the public who would like to make a comment, or?
Yep.
Diane Proctor, 57 Sudbury Road. Thank you, Chris, for that comprehensive description of what's going on. I think that I speak for the League of Women Voters at this moment because I think there are many archival concerns. There are a lot of tapes and information presently stored somewhere, and finding a way to make certain that there's continuity between that archival material and making sure that the public has access to that in the future, because those are important historical documents, is, I think, important. And I hope in the work that goes forward, some clarity for, and not that you weren't clear about it, it just hasn't been the primary concern, that some clarity and addressing that concern will be part of the discussions that are forthcoming.
That's very important, thank you.
Thank you very much.
We're ready, I guess, now to move to item number 7, the review and approve business recognition program. I gather we're gonna, that's in progress.
I met with Andrew and Aaron, the public affairs officer, and we've got a process in place. The big hang-up is if there is a hang-up, it's just making sure that we have adequate records to ensure that we know all of the businesses, and there was a spreadsheet that was made available. I've gone through it, added some folks to it, but we need to be sure that we've got everybody in place. I think the one thing we talked about before was we might do this on the town's birthday, but I think the conclusion that we reached was it better to do it right and you know, facts all squared away than try to get it on some particular day. So, so we'll just do that, and I'll report back to you. But we'll get it done fairly soon.
Great. Say it's waited over 100 years, we can wait
Wait another couple months, right?
We scheduled a joint session snow date for October 1 special town meeting and confirm location for September 12th public hearing. I think the plan on the snow date, as we're calling it,
Please let it not be snow.
Wishful thinking.
It's also a date, if you don't, town meeting doesn't complete business on the first night, then it's the second night.
I think we didn't want to kind of encourage delay. But October 2nd is the suggested date. I don't know if anybody has any difficulty with that.
Great suggestion.
Not too complicated, and the location.
We'll have dug out by then.
The location for the September 12th public hearing on the special town meeting is the townhouse hearing room. So do we need, I guess we do
Move to
have.
approve the calendar as read with September 12th hearing at the townhouse for the special town meeting. Town meeting will be held on Monday, October 1st, beginning at 7 p.m. in the high school auditorium. And should there be snow, we will hold a special town meeting Tuesday, October 2nd at the high school auditorium.
Second.
Linda, we'll let you go again.
Sounds good.
I'll take that as an aye.
Yes.
Aye.
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 Thank you. We now review draft warrant and set order of articles for the October 1st special town meeting. Those are included in the documents that Andrew provided to us. And they have been reviewed by town moderator, and she felt that the order was fine, and So I don't know whether we've all had an opportunity. I think the first three have to do with W.R. Grace. Then we have two of them which will deal with White Pond. Then the high school has two items. And then we have a number of appropriating of funds and acceptance of a gift for affordable housing in lieu of credits, and then a grant of easement for the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. Any comments or suggestions from anybody?
I think this looks fine. There are 13 articles, more than I would have expected.
Right. It's always surprising when you open a special town meeting, how many things appear. I always hope that maybe that means that we will be more consolidated at annual town meeting.
Count on it.
I think the notion of sort of the W.R. Grace having three is because they're somewhat distinctive issues, but I don't see them being terribly controversial. And the same kind of for the others, but
Another thing where there are expenditures.
expenditures are always an issue. I'm sure the finance committee will take a good look at that and help us along the way.
I also notice, I mean, you know, some of this is just points of gratitude. I mean, we're
Yeah.
accepting some gifts here that are, you know, the town is quite lucky to have. I mean, the White Pond beach will be an asset to all.
There will be costs though.
Of course there will be, but it's still a pretty significant change,
It's an amazing gift.
yes.
Linda, I don't know if you had a chance, if you got a copy of this draft, but
I did, and one question I have is really, and someone else raised this, and I just don't know if it's been clarified yet, whether a couple of the warrant articles included what looked like a potential operating costs, and whether or not we could, that was correctly placed in the warrant.
Are you specifically looking at Article 9? That's an appropriation of funds for the school resource officer?
I think one place that came up had to do with the operating White Pond. So I don't have the article number right now this minute in front of me.
That's number 4.
The,
Four, okay. And there was one other one that talked about,
Or number 5, actually, for 30.
Yeah.
okay. So I don't know if that, I saw that issue raised and I just don't know if that got clarified.
The issue on White Pond is that we will be budgeting for town meeting consideration in April, a budget to operate White Pond beginning July 1st. But we will incur some expenses, particularly if we open the beach on Memorial Day, which is customary. We'll have 4 or 5 weeks there of staff salaries that will have to be paid. And then there's the process of selling beach stickers, printing beach stickers and selling them and developing a process for that. So there's some expenses that will incur in the current fiscal year that we do not have a budget for.
And that all makes sense to me. I'm not questioning that so much as the, I guess I would use the word legality of potentially asking for bonding for operation funds.
So we, let me see, I think we deleted the
raise or
bonding
appropriate.
authorization. But we also, we typically have standard language for financing articles, saying that we're going to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds or borrow through the issuance of notes. That's standard language that leaves us some flexibility at the time writing the motions. But in this case, we're proposing to use, proposing to raise taxes in this case because our free cash hasn't been certified. Is that correct, Madam Finance Director? Yeah, so we are talking raising taxes because the free cash, although we have about $10 million in free cash, it hasn't been certified yet and won't be before the special town meeting meets.
All right. Thank you.
any other questions or comments?
So, well, just to be clear, then Article 5's language will be changed when we get to town meeting.
That's right.
To a
And it-
vote.
To raise
Say-
and appropriate. And raise means taxation.
Okay.
But we are talking about $30,000, so it's not likely to be a
Right, it's not a
a
substantial
noticeable
amount.
jump.
And I'll just mention the school resource officer kind of came in a little bit late, middle of last week, but it relates to the fact that the youth coordinator position is now vacant. We had the youth coordinator resign in July, I think it was, and move on. And the police and youth services folks would like to reconstitute that position into a school resource position. So we're really not able to access those funds. And we didn't really want to wait until April to replace the youth coordinator position.
And this position will be managed in where?
The police officer, it will be a police officer reporting to the chief of police, but there is an agreement between the school department and the police chief on how the school resource officer will work, sort of a standard state language that communication, and how the position will work relative to.
Okay, maybe I'm just being crazy. Don't we already have a school resource officer?
In the high school. So
In the
this
high
will be in the middle school, and it's new to the middle school.
New to the middle school, but does that, and that's instead of having a youth.
Instead of having a youth coordinator, because we found that the youth coordinator really didn't get down into those middle school kids. It was hard for any one person to be all things to all people. So the community chest, which is funding this position, Kate, who's in charge of the human services operation, the police and the schools all felt this was a better use of those funds, both of the community chest resources and the town resources. So we're going to give it a try. We haven't had one in the middle school
It will
before.
come out of a stabilization fund.
The funds, the town portion will come out of the Muse Stabilization Fund, and then we'll also be continuing to use the grant from the community chest.
And then as an ongoing practice, it'll be part of the regular budget.
I think the police chief hopes to use the stabilization fund for a period of three years, and then after that, he'll build it into his budget.
It's helpful.
That'll be a
So-
uniformed officer.
So, yes.
Any other comments or questions anybody has? Ready for a motion? Sure.
Yes. Move to approve the October 1 special town meeting warrant as drafted. Yeah, as
Subject-
drafted.
Subject
think we
to
have any
minor
other-
editing
I
as
don't
deemed
think we have any,
necessary.
do we? We
I-
haven't edited anything yet.
You might find.
Actually, I'm almost certainly there will. The description that I've provided of the White Pond real estate
Okay.
refers to the assessor's parcels, and I believe the White Pond Associates are going to submit an A&R plan to the planning board and reconfigure the land and refer to that reconfigured land in their conservation restriction other documents. So I think the language on the White Pond, it'll be the same 18 acres, but it'll be reconfigured. So I
Okay,
think
so there'll be minor edits.
that's a,
Subject to minor edits as deemed necessary by select board, town manager, and town council, and/or town council.
And this would then allow this to be sent to
the printer sooner and to the homeowners sooner if we,
Second?
Linda?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Review and approve the 2019 annual town meeting calendar. I will just tell you that I got a little confused because I saw that there was a joint meeting on September 20th, and we're also having a joint meeting on September the 12th. I wasn't sure if that was a misprint or what was going on, but the 12th is for the special town meeting, the 20th is for the annual town meeting.
Wow.
So for that
In case we all missed each other too much.
And that is in our packet. I don't know if anybody has any questions or comments.
Just one related question to the document that came to my attention, and someone asked me whether or not committee meetings can be held on voting days.
Yes.
And I thought that the answer was no, but
No, I'm not aware of any prohibition on committees meeting on election day.
As long as
So-
they're not in the room that's being used for the election.
Right. I think because the people have a chance to go to the polls for, from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., I think it is, there's a sense that if they do want to attend a committee meeting, the voting won't necessarily conflict with that. I know we try to avoid scheduling committee meetings when town meeting is meeting so that people are conflicted between going to town meeting and going to a committee meeting. But on election day, we don't have any practice of that, I don't believe.
okay, good.
We do have various snow days for February and March, which might actually be necessary.
Right. All right. I think that's
So
really-
earlier, this has been brought to you again, earlier you voted on the days that town meeting would be held on the second week of April, but
Right.
we didn't have a schedule for the public hearings for you, so that's what's.
This
that's
is the
what's-
result of having chosen those days.
Okay.
We have
Any
a
discussion? If not,
motion.
move to approve the 2019 annual town meeting calendar as drafted, subject to minor edits as deemed necessary by the select board chair, town manager, and/or town council.
Second.
Linda?
Aye.
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 Okay, now we are a review list of proposed Community Preservation Act municipal projects. We have a memorandum regarding potential town projects which are being recommended.
So you have a memorandum from the planning director, Marcia Rasmussen, with a list of 10 projects that she is recommending and prepared to prepare the applications for. And then that was supplemented by a memo from Kate Hodges concerning a White Pond project and the Public Works Department concerning Phase 2 of funding for improvements at Emerson Field. And it has been the board's custom in August to review the town applications and opine on which the board feels should take the higher priority.
I would note that I think the amount of if we did all the projects, would be more than what we're anticipating will be available for funding. So I do think some of these are second or third stages of previously committed
Right.
funds.
Right.
And I think it should probably, the Junction Village people should be aware that even though there have been grants approved in the past 2 years, this year there's a request for $300,000. If for some reason that project did not go through, none of those funds have been expended.
Right.
And would not be expended unless the project is approved, and it's kind of the last money in, so there's concerns about that.
And then I was looking at the Giroux Park 300,000, and we just heard about the appropriation, or the authorization for the same number. I assume it's a timing issue as much as anything else. But then I can't help but look at the Warner's Pond dredging, and that was on our schedule long before we closed on Giroux. And it would strike me as critical prior to moving forward with using, ideally they'd happen parallel, but that's an important step.
Yeah, yeah. And so therefore you'd give that a high priority.
Mhm.
I think the first three on the list are clear, high priorities for us. I don't remember, Chris, frankly, as I'm sure it's my lack of memory, having a discussion about item number 4.
That's what I was wondering as well.
This was something that we received relative to the Ralph Waldo Emerson land, which is the land adjacent to the police station, that open farm field near the ice house.
Talked about it a number of
Some
times last
wetlands,
year.
and then a lot, I believe, lots on either side of the Emerson house. Notice that the land was available for sale came in at exactly the same time as the Balls Hill Road project.
Right.
And we put a lot of effort into the Balls Hill Road acquisition. And we asked the Ralph Waldo Emerson Association folks to hold off. Their interest is in selling this land to create an endowment so that they can maintain the building properly. So they've been patient and held off. They've also split the purchase opportunity into 3 different parcels. So and this would be the wetland area. I think the least costly. They put forth they'd be willing to take. Sell to the town, the wetland area, which is part of where the Thoreau Amble goes from Haywood Meadow through to Fairyland and Walden. They've granted an easement to the town for that trail, but the NRC is interested in acquiring the fee interest in the wetland back there. It's unbuildable, therefore the price is low.
Why would we?
And I think the total, the easement, I think, is a limited duration, maybe 5 years, and it's renewed. I don't remember the details. It's not guaranteed that we would have that access for the trail through there, as I understand things. The farm field is the area that's most of interest. It's the largest area. I think the NRC would love to see it acquired for agricultural purposes. The Emerson folks have said they'd love to see some affordable housing. It's adjacent to the housing authorities, 3 duplexes that are there. So they've expressed an interest in maybe seeing some housing constructed in that area. And then there are the 2, I believe there's 2 parcels, one on either side of the Emerson house that are vacant. And they would probably never dream of selling them for private development, but they view it as a source of, it's a value and resources that they could use to raise some money. So they're hoping the town would buy a conservation restriction or buy the fee in those parcels, but agree not to develop them. So I think the total request for the cost of all 3 parcels was on the order of about $1.2 million. I got that.
Well, Ellen Emerson.
Ellen, would you mind
Yeah,
stepping up? Thank you, Ellen, for helping me out here.
Hi, Ellen Emerson, trustee of the Ralph Waldo Emerson Memorial Association. I had no idea this was on the agenda tonight, so I didn't bring all the documentation. I think Chris has explained the situation accurately. What was the last question you just asked? I was unprepared.
The total value, total request for all, if the town was to purchase all of the property, what is the total asking price, so to speak?
Okay, again, I don't have our figures. We're waiting to get an appraisal from the town, and I've been in touch with Delia and Marcia about this. We've met with them.
They have commissioned an appraisal.
Right. And the last time I spoke with Delia about this was a couple of weeks ago. She said the appraisal is being done, and that they hope to have this, the CPA application done by September 24th. And I don't know what that would entail. Basically, Chris explained it properly. There is, you face the house to the right. Between the house and the gun house, there's a parcel of land that is buildable, but we would never want it to be built on. We hope to have a conservation restriction put on that land, purchased by the town or by the land trust or somebody. The wetlands is adjacent to our land, and I think it probably does include the land through which the easement now goes, which we gave to the town for the Emerson Thoreau Amble. So that, I think that piece would be larger than where the Amble currently goes, and I think we thought it would be of interest to the town because it would permanently protect the Amble. It would then belong to the town. Right now, part of it is on our land. I think part of it is perhaps not on our land. I'm not really sure. Again, I have all the maps at home. I wasn't expecting this. There is a buildable lot next to what we call the pumpkin lot, next to the police and fire station. And that is, we've looked at the FEMA guidelines and all that, and we know that it's buildable. But we are very interested in using that for affordable housing if the town would like. But we have to sell that lot at its highest fair market value because the house does need money for an endowment fund.
We don't have an idea at this point what that amount is?
what the amount of the appraisal of the buildable lot. Again, I would have the appraisals we've done. We had them done by Land Vest, I think, just last year. I have a huge file at home. I didn't know this was on the agenda, so.
I'm wondering
Don't
if
have them.
the, the warrant article acceptance of the gift for affordable housing in lieu of units, if that passed, there'd be sufficient funds to build that lot and get started on some housing. And it sounds like the monetary aspect is a timing issue. So the $100,000 for the wetland could perhaps be put off for a year.
Right, yep. If you found other resources to accomplish the larger, they thought, I think the thought was between Marcia, Adelia, and the Emerson Associates was to start small and have the town acquire
And
the
that's
least
appreciated,
costly
but-
parcel.
Yeah, I think we realized that this could be an incremental thing, but we definitely wanted to get at least one of the parcels on the warrant for this coming town meeting, because it's already been delayed a bit. And we were initially approached by the town to see if we had an interest in selling it, so we're sort of following up from an approach made a few years back. Yeah.
I think the total of all three was about 1.2 million.
I'd much prefer seeing a buildable lot
Right.
show
Was there-
up,
yeah.
rather than a wetland area that you can't build on anyway. And Gamble's a terrific trail, but I don't know what else you could do with it. So I'd really encourage us to see if we could get that buildable lot.
Moving.
Well, it's gonna be nice if, Article 12 would help
Yeah.
us along that way and give us,
Well, there are gonna be a lot of demands on that $1 million, but certainly
yeah,
that seems like one that ought to be considered.
yeah,
Well, we would certainly welcome it if it gets on the warrant.
yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
okay, thank you very much.
If our job is to set priorities
Yeah.
among these, this is not my highest priority purchase for the town. That, I'm just
Yeah.
suggesting that
I
that's.
think the first three, as I said, and
Yeah.
then, seems to me as we have an ongoing commitment to the Bruce Freeman
Rail
Rail.
trail, right.
And we always seem to do the Regional Housing
Yes.
Service Office, so
Yep.
that's kind of
Yep.
a
And
good
we
idea.
had indicated our support for the open space at Junction Village as well. So that, for me, those would be
Right.
higher priorities. Do we need, what do you need from us tonight?
That's projects 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 10, are the ones that I
Well,
heard.
that's what I said, but I don't.
No, but I think that
So
you've
you
got,
started the ball rolling.
right, 1, 3, 4,
I
5,
mean,
6.
everything on here is perfectly worthy, as near as I can tell. I know the Wheeler Harrington house needs some attention, so I think that,
So, and we've spent quite a bit of money so far on the Wheeler Harrington House studies and design, and we're looking for somebody to move into the house. We should be able to know the condition. I would support that one. So first I've seen the Haywood Meadow stone wall.
And the two additional, the White Pond ADA access,
Oh, I
Would
didn't
be
get
critical.
yeah.
I would definitely support that.
And that's project 12, is it, or 11?
11.
well,
And the
it's
public
not that
works.
I don't support
Yeah.
that, but it's that, is the timing right
Yeah.
for that? I mean,
For White Pond?
yeah,
Yes, it is. We do expect to have, just a reminder, we're hoping that the gift of funds from White Pond is in the neighborhood of between $300,000 and $400,000. But that money will be restricted to capital improvements only, so not for operations, and capital improvements that are consistent with a master plan. So we know that some improvements are needed to the bathhouses and the lifeguard
Right.
area and the parking lot and the ADA. So it does seem like it makes some sense to begin that process of upgrading the facilities really haven't been upgraded. I think they built a stone wall down by the beach. Yeah, Jane would know.
I guess my point only, Chris, was should this be incorporated into the whole set of plans we might have for White Pond once the town
Right, versus being pulled out
as
aside,
opposed
right?
to, I mean,
Mhm.
I'm perfectly, you know, I don't really have a point of view about
I
it.
think I'll mention Kate, if you don't mind, Kate, who prepared this, also, she's submitted a grant application or is in the process. Do you mind making it?
Evening.
Hi, Kate Hodges, Assistant Town Manager. I submitted a grant application for a portion of the design and the initial site work for the ADA ramp. So all said and done, the amount of funding that we're going to need to create some drainage for the roadway, new handicapped accessible men's room, women's room, a family changing room, and then a first aid station, and the accessible walkway. It's about 260 feet long, but the depth that it goes down from top to bottom is about a 60-foot drop.
Yeah, it's the opposite of handicap accessible.
So it's going to cost somewhere around $1.3 million, all said and done. And so what we've tried to do is piece it out to allocate, asking for funding from certain grants and CPC and putting money into the capital plan over the next 3 years, because we want to operate the beach as a public bathing beach, which is going to be certified by the state and our own Board of Health. Because of that, it needs to be accessible.
The money we're getting from White Pond will be able to be put in that mix.
The money that we're putting in will be able to be used for the ADA accessible walkway, which is part of the portion of their plan. But it won't be enough. That'll only probably do about a third of it once we finish with design and site work. Believe it or not, the amount of clearing that needs to be done is pretty significant. And also the grade can't be more than a 5%. So we want to make sure it's quite a bit of a
like
a long
switchbacks.
meandering path that is going to have to come down.
Start acting.
Will do.
Thanks.
So I do
Great,
support,
thank you.
support the timing on
Yeah.
this. And as this is an enormous gift to the town, and for us to do it well and do it right, I'd like to make sure that we have the
No, it's
capitalization.
not any opposition other than is the time,
Timing,
right?
yeah. We hope to have the beach open next summer, May 31st.
So do we need to develop a separate memorandum going back to you and Marcia?
No, I don't think you need to. I will convey to Marcia that right now, again, I have 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 10, 11, and 7. 7 was Wheeler, yeah.
That's my,
Those are
I
your-
have an interest in that. You may disagree with me
I
on
do
that.
too.
Taylor Harrington.
Small money.
It's small money for a project that's, we've done so much work so far, we just,
No.
the last bit of it.
Keep going.
Yep.
Improvements at Emerson Field,
Clearly, it's phase 2 funding, so
Yeah.
it's something where, how come none of our phase 2 are in the $15,000 range? It's always the next big hit.
I think until we get a firmer number in terms of what the anticipated
Scope of work.
budget that the CPA is gonna have. Obviously, we'd like to continue on projects that we've funded partially.
Mm-hmm.
And the review process with CP funds may not, and the request is for 400,000. Last year, they requested 600 and received 2. Request for 4 may also be split into multiple years funding.
Right, so in saying yes, we could say yes to a smaller number.
And it does sound to me, I mean, I think it's certainly a worthy project, but it can be phased.
Right.
And it's not quite as urgent to get it all done right now.
So I would support the project. We don't determine the level at which it gets funded, but I would support a project that continues the renovations of the fields at Emerson.
Can I ask the finance director, do you have a working number for how much CPA funds will be available to the committee?
Not yet.
Not yet, okay. Thank you, sorry.
It is likely not to be tremendously different from last
I would
year.
think 1.2, but it's been in that neighborhood pretty consistently, but.
I think some of the issue had to do with state matching funds.
Right.
Yeah, right.
How that was gonna operate, so.
And how many other communities have
Communities.
Well, I
coined
know a
and-
lot of other communities, but I think there is a requirement that it be at least 15% matching. But that has to get funded as well. So whatever they can say, at least 15%, but unless the legislature funds that, it doesn't do much good, so. Linda, any comments you'd like to make?
Well, this is always challenging because so many of these projects, as I think someone already said, it's not that we're not supportive of all of them. It's tough trying to prioritize them. The funding, at this, I think the CPC committee is starting from the assumption that they'll more or less have the same amount of funds that they had last year. So they started operating around 1.4 when they first looked at the projects. If it comes in slightly higher than that, which we hope, but it's still going to be tight. I mean, that's the context for the money.
And these are town projects. We don't even know what other.
Right.
options there are. So we know it's a competitive process.
Yeah.
All the decisions are made in open sessions, so people can attend and opine and offer their thoughts and suggestions on any one of the projects.
It's a very thoughtful committee, too.
Yeah, it's a very good committee.
Okay, well, I guess we do not have to take any type of vote on that. so
We've
we
given
can-
you our
Give
indications.
you our marching
Yeah.
orders.
Great, I'll
we
convey that to
can,
Marcia.
Move now to the draft town manager job description, which has been provided, I think dated August 10th. And I thought a very thorough job. Thank you, Chris.
It was based off the job description that was prepared at the time I was recruited in the early 1990s. I will say, I looked for town manager job descriptions from other communities. Most towns don't, with a town manager charter, do not have a job description. They refer to the charter. I did ask, I think the HR office would prefer that there be a job description because there's more to the job than what's outlined in the charter, and it provides some context. But, so I've asked her for her comments on this. She hasn't responded to me yet, but I think she finds it helpful that it provides a little bit more of a flavor for what the job is like. But I did want you to know that it's unusual. I looked at Lexington and Andover and Danvers, and none of those communities, Weston had posted to have a job description for town manager. So the search committee may find that the consultants discourage the use of the job description, or I still think it's worth having it and updating it, but how it gets used by the search committee may be an open question.
The town charter sections were included as well for
Right.
everybody, so.
Would it need to be adopted in any particular manner? I mean,
Typically, I think it would be by the board, and the personnel board may have a role. I recommend the job descriptions and the person for other employees, and the personnel board approves those job descriptions. So it might be that the board and the personnel board would approve it.
So it seemed like it would be premature for us to approve it tonight, right?
Right,
They
right.
haven't- The HR
Yep.
director hasn't reviewed it, we don't have the comments.
I want to hear what HR has to say.
Right,
about it.
we'd rather get the feedback
But
before.
I think this is a really good description a fair description of the things that we see that you do.
Well, it's an important first document for any committee that might form too. I mean, it really,
Great, so we'll continue the discussion in 2 weeks. I'll let you know what HR, Amy Foley, HR director, and if you're interested, Dee Moskus is our labor counsel, and he's also pro bono counsel to town managers, and is very familiar with the town manager search process. So I might ask him if is there any reason why he does recommend or does not recommend a job description be adopted, if you're interested in that advice. Great.
We're now ready to review and consider approving the 2018-2019 board goals.
I thought you did a really good job in synthesizing our thoughts and
Right.
our interests.
I
I know other
appreciate
committees
the
are doing.
input from the various members, very helpful, and doesn't, good part of it remains year to year, but obviously we do update and change, and town meeting affects what our goals are.
Right, and this is obviously not limited to, it's
Right,
I mean, I look at, on number 7, pursue analysis of the condition of the Ball Benson barn and house. It seems to me, I've read that many times, and we don't seem to spend too much time on it. We always do it once, but it,
It may be part of what comes out of the Harrington Wheeler
right,
House
exactly. So
study.
this might be
One
the
of the
time that we'll
locations it was
finally be able
listed.
to take action with that information. But I meant there are other issues that we'll
Yeah.
do that might seem higher priority.
The only question I have is on the second page, balance, equity, and diversity. To engage and support the formation of a Concord Affordable Housing Funding Committee. We have
We
that.
have one.
We have that.
Yeah.
It's done.
So I would just edit that.
Continue to support.
Well, what is, doesn't their term, isn't it a time-limited committee?
Yes.
So I think we are up to a decision point, I think. We have to figure out how we make a decision on the recommendations. They came,
Yeah.
presented to us. We had a number of recommendations of things that we could approve to go forward for how we fund affordable housing. That's our task now, I think, in consultation with the committee members. You're more thoughtful.
Rarely. No, my issue is, we heard from that committee, I don't
Right.
know, my reluctance was, this is a comment about the committee rather than, I mean, we have one already, so the language needs to be changed. We heard from the committee, they had a number of things we could do. What we didn't hear from the committee was what they thought.
Right, what their recommendation
I-
was, right.
I guess my hope was, in addition to laying out some options, which we had heard most of those options before, they would be able to come to us with
Their top 3.
their thinking about the ones that were most suited to be implemented by the town, and those that seem to be out of whack with what we're
Right.
trying to accomplish, and the like. So I would hope we would, next step with them would get them to come back to us with some recommendations.
From what I gather, I think they were hoping that individually, we would provide them with sort of our individual thoughts of their priorities and what we thought about them before, and they're gonna sort of incorporate that and then come to us with that, but I think they.
I thought that process would be awkward to respond individually with,
Oh, no.
Well, it's also not
I
very-
get a lot from the conversation about why one option works better than another, and what are the tax implications on one versus another.
Right. Well, I
I'm
would,
informed by my
Yeah.
colleagues.
I would also be concerned that it takes it out of the transparency of an open meeting.
I don't
And
want
now
to do
we're,
that.
now we're having one-on-one conversations about something that's gonna direct how they come back to
Yeah.
us. And I don't think that's,
Okay, I will notify them not to expect.
But I think we need to, I think in terms of our board goals,
Yeah.
I think it's our goal of ours to identify make recommendations or decide the approaches that we will take.
I think we will need to go to town meeting with something very
Yeah.
concrete.
We
So,
will definitely,
you know,
whether we raise taxes or
after we've heard from them in a recommendation sense, I think a step after that is we're gonna wanna hear from other parts of the community, what the existing housing folks think about the various options and the like. So I think even after they've come back to us with, here's what we think, and here's why, I think before I would want to say, okay, here's the snowball we kind of want to take to town meeting, I'd want to hear from,
I'm wondering whether they know, I wonder if that's a lot of responsibility for the committee. They've given us
No, no,
all the
we
thoughtful
would-
options.
that
That
would
would
be
be
our
us, right.
responsibility. We would, I'm just making this up, but we would say on October
Right.
someday. This is gonna be a significant agenda item, and we're gonna wanna hear from,
The public and.
And I think that's the right process. I think
Yeah.
that's what we would do is.
that's after they've come to us and said, here are the 5 ways you can do it. Here's 2 that why we could do it, we don't think it works too well for the town. These 2 are really good, this one is, who knows?
Yeah,
They've
Okay.
done a lot of that. We should be able to move forward.
Yeah, but I think we need to hear that from them.
So if we just limit it and put engage Concord Affordable Housing Funding Committee to pursue projects which provide more types of affordable housing in Concord.
For our goals, for.
Yeah. When we,
Yep.
Linda, do you have any comments on this?
None that I haven't, I think the comments I made have been incorporated, and I agree with some of the comments I'm hearing now.
Good, thank you.
All right, the only other comment I have is you, item number, I don't know if it's redundant or not, page 2, under balance equity, number 8.
I think we have that somewhere else.
That's, well, it's number
well,
1.
it's also, we've,
Number
now,
2.
now we've received their,
Well, number 2, on the front page,
Yep.
talks about
Envision
our
Concord.
responsibilities and the like, so I don't know
yeah,
we're
why we
adding
would do it
anything.
too.
what's
I
number
think it's
8.
sufficient to have it
all.
just in number
Okay.
2.
Get rid of 8.
I noticed and couldn't find the second reference. I remembered reading it. Okay. The intent is good, to support the recommendations of the count.
I have a hunch that'll be a, select board goal for a few years.
I think that's probably true.
Well, there's, in 8, on the second page, there are some words in there that don't appear on number 2 on the front page, so you might think if you
Okay.
strike 8, you might add a
Incorporates it.
couple of
Yeah.
leadership,
Yeah.
recommendation kind of words out of there.
Well, thank you all. We'll get that completed, and should we plan at some point fairly soon to get or check to see whether the Affordable Housing Committee is ready to come before us? But I do think we should, this is a big item, we
And it's
need to,
you
This is
know,
a big
it's
deal.
surprising how much time it takes.
yeah,
Right.
It's a big
Yeah.
deal.
yeah.
So
We should get it right.
we've got, we heard about the Emerson property, we've got that house over to Giroux Land. There's the Black Birch
Yeah.
article.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on there. We've
Yeah.
got just quite a while.
Well, we've got a wealth of opportunities, and we need to make sure that we're not missing things.
Do we need a motion on this to approve the board goals?
Let's see, whether we,
Move to approve the 2018-2019 board goals as
Revised.
revised.
Second.
Linda?
I
Aye.
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 Thank you all. We are now ready for public comments. Please step to the floor.
Good evening, Jean Goldsberry, 1832 Main Street. I'm coming back to see if there has been any progress on the board's plans for public-private partnerships.
I have not made any
Item
progress
number
since the
5.
last conversation.
Board goals.
Yeah.
To implement the recommendations of the Public-Private Partnership Committee to standardize a memorandum of agreement as part of the town's engagements in such partnerships.
Terrific. Is there a timetable on that?
I think it's when we get a kind of a slight gap in what's going on and other aspects. This has been a fairly busy couple of weeks and a lot of other items which come to the forefront. And we don't have a public-private partnership kind of issue that I think is putting this on the front burner, but it is simmering on the back burner and will certainly be gotten to in as timely a fashion as we can.
We did suggest at one of our earlier meetings that we reconstitute the committee in some form to help us move it forward. Because as we look at special town meeting, the public hearings before, then we get into the town meeting planning, that I don't know if we still want to discuss whether we should reconstitute the committee to help us move it along.
Let's get that on the agenda for the 20th.
27th?
27.
Would that, you can take that as, we
Certainly.
discussed here once.
Okay.
And I think more
I think
hands
we
in the
all
pot
have
of those who
What-
know most about it might
Mhm.
be helpful to this board to be able to
Okay.
make it work.
Okay. I can't speak for everyone who was on the prior committee, but I would expect that many of the members would be willing to assist. And we did quite a lot of research. We had a pretty significant list of public-private partnerships. So, we could certainly assist if that's something that the select board would want.
Well, you certainly developed a lot of expertise that we don't have, and that would be a good place to start.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Yep, I'm glad you're here.
Diane Proctor, 57 Sudbury Road. I wanted to alert all of you that on August 27th, from 7 to 8:30 at the Chelmsford High School, the address is 200 Richardson Road. There will be an opportunity to once again meet the 10 candidates who are running for Nikki Sangas' seat in the 3rd Congressional Region.
And what's the seating capacity of?
There
that
you go.
space?
This has over 1,000, room for over 1,000. And unfortunately, the last time, we had to turn away quite a few people who were very interested in hearing these candidates speak. We welcome everyone on the 27th from 7 to 8:30 at the Chelmsford High School.
We anticipate that the select board meeting might not have quite as many attendees, because we have that.
I understand that it's very busy, including it's our granddaughter's 3rd birthday. So I mean, let's talk about what matters here. No, it's a busy day. We understand that, but it's also an opportunity for those who missed this chance. It's going to be a tight and interesting race. Needless to say, because it's a League of Women Voters invitation program, all candidates have been invited, and to my knowledge now, the 10 Democratic candidates have agreed to appear. So we welcome everyone.
The address again was?
The address is 230 North, the address is, the forum will be held on the evening of Monday night, on 230 North Road, Chelmsford. I have 2 different addresses here. It is 200 Richardson Road, right? Okay. I'm sitting here looking at 2 contradictory addresses. If you want to come, you might go to 200 Richardson Road and find the Chelmsford High School there. Okay, thank you very much.
So in other words, Google Chelmsford High School. And you'll
I
get it.
think that's prudent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, good evening. My name's Jerry Susi. I live at 770 Main Street. If I may, I'll just read these remarks. I have a hopeful twist on a difficult topic.
I will announce that you did communicate that you're going to be
Yep.
here, and you've also provided a document, which
Yep.
we very much appreciate.
Thank you. Yes, I've made some revisions since then, and that's what I'll read from. So, we're all going to die. We don't talk about it much, but we should. Many of us have experienced serious illness and end of life in our family and others. We may even have been part of the decision-making or caregiving. And if so, we likely weren't nearly well enough informed or supported. I think there's a way to help normalize these conversations and improve how they can unfold. I'm working with a small group of colleagues and organizations in Concord and elsewhere on a program series for this October. I want to inform you about these efforts tonight as the town's senior-most elected officials, in hopes that you can help expand the audience of local citizens who can benefit, and that you can also support these efforts, which are aimed to make Concord an important destination for clinical education. I'm an expert nurse certified in palliative care and hospice. I work with patients and families facing serious illness and an end of life. And I provide education and support to caregivers and clinicians. My practice is Death Nurse LLC. I was also the primary caregiver for my wife, Jean, through her decline from Alzheimer's to her peaceful death at home in January 2016. Our goals were for Jean to be safe, comfortable, and content at home, where she could be dignified and loved. The Adult Day Health Program near Newbury Court, run by the Cooperative Elder Services, and the Council on Aging's monthly caregiver support group were both essential in helping us meet those goals. I understand the challenges we face individually and collectively when it comes to serious illness and end of life. And the way I express it's almost like a bumper sticker. Boomers are getting old, sick, and dying. It's a demographic wave, and the surf is most definitely up. We're going to need a lot of providers and a lot of care, and that's a problem, because there's already a shortage of certified clinicians and qualified caregivers, even as the population expands. The gap is going to get worse. It also means we need to take initiative, but that's not a bad thing. The biggest clinical buzzword today is patient-centered care. In its best form, it means we hold the keys as patient and family members. It really is all about us, and we need to be the ones calling the shots. But that also means we need to learn some things about serious illness and care at end of life. It's not rocket science, but it is a difficult subject. Towards that end, earlier this summer, I started a weekly death nurse drop-in office hours near the water fountain on Monument Square every Thursday from 10 to 1, though I've stopped for August. I worked with Kate Hodges and Inspector Shelley to get that up and running and be available to talk about death in broad daylight with anybody who drops by. Jill Weintraub and Stephanie Cloutier at Community Ed also recognized the importance of these topics, as did their predecessors. We've worked together and provided classes on advanced care planning and care at end of life since 2012. I'm here now to describe a program that's grown from a discussion that the three of us had earlier about what to put in the fall catalog. Stephanie and Jill suggested we match a documentary film with a discussion, Q&A. But that idea has grown into something I call Concord Talks About Death. My goal is for it to become the premier community and adult ed event in town every year beginning this October. It could fill the hole left when we just lost the Concord Festival of Authors. And just like the Concord Festival of Authors was known and enjoyed by people both within and from outside the town, I want to make Concord Talks About Death a notable event for clinicians from Boston to Worcester, nurses, physicians, social workers, chaplains, counselors, educators. 27 years ago, and it's scary to think that, I was involved in developing the Carlisle Pig and Pepper. I can't avoid thinking of this as the Pig and Pepper of death. It's 3 related programs on 3 separate nights in October, each with a short film and a speaker. And of course, it's free, open to the public, and includes movie snacks. Though I'm working closely with adult and community ed, this is being funded outside their usual sources. I'm working with colleagues and organizations on the content, the logistics, and the fundraising. We're halfway to our goal of $15,000 to cover all program costs. We expect to reach that goal by the end of the month. We've reserved the films and the speakers, and we're starting to increase outreach and publicity, and that's also why I'm here. A quick rundown of the programs. On October 2nd, we have Caitlin Doty and the movie Steelman Town. The topic is caring for a person and family from the moment of death through to a funeral and memorialization, burial, and bereavement. The movie is about a green burial ground in a natural setting. Caitlin is a licensed mortician and author. On the 18th, we have the movie Endgame and a guest, Arden O'Donnell. The topic is caring for a person and family through the advanced stages of illness and disease and at end of life, palliative care and hospice. The movie's about patients and families at a large teaching hospital and at a hospice in San Francisco. Arden is a clinical social worker, researcher, and doctoral student. And then finally, on October 31st, what a way to celebrate Halloween, we have the film Extremis, which was nominated for a short documentary in 2016 for Oscar, and featuring Susan Block. The topic is making informed decisions about medical treatment in serious illness, and the movie takes place or is about making treatment decisions in a critical care unit in Oakland, California. Our speaker, Susan, is a physician and professor of medicine, and she's the physician who taught Atul Gawande how to have meaningful end-of-life conversations with patients and families. So I appreciate this chance to give you the first up on this program, and I hope for the chance to keep you updated as we go toward pulling it off.
Thank you.
Wondering whether you've considered CCTV as a source of...
Exactly. I was thinking
Absolutely.
the same thing.
Yes, because this is the kind of event that will have value for the people attending, but will also provide lots of material for people to digest in smaller pieces, maybe streaming parts of it online.
Shining in people's
Exactly.
experiences.
Exactly. Yeah.
The other question I have is, have you had any interaction with Emerson Hospital?
I have not specifically. There are a couple of physicians at Emerson that I worked with years ago when I was there that have moved into providing palliative care rather than intensive care hospitalist services that they were specializing in before. In general, it's hard to get a hospital to sign on to a program about death. It's hard to get a hospital to hang a banner on the side of the building that says chosen as one of the best places to die. But certainly, certainly reaching out to the clinical community, because the intent of this program, these programs, is for community education, for lay people to start getting a grasp of the topics, but also for practicing clinicians already in the field or clinicians who aren't specifically working with serious illness at end of life, but whose patients oftentimes need those services. So yes, clinical community is definitely in there.
Following on Tom's question, have you reached out to any of the senior assisted living or senior living? We have Concord Park in town. We have Newbury Court, which you mentioned. I'm thinking about Lincoln's Commons. I mean,
Yep.
we've got,
Absolutely.
and this,
This is, we're going to roll this out through August and September with local promotion and exactly that, kind of the one-on-one promotion you get from visiting a facility and meeting with directors and so forth. The Council on Aging is in both Carlisle and Concord, are organizations I'm familiar with, and they're part of the bus tour, the reaching out to letting them know what's going on. And flip side, councils on aging or seniors groups are not often as willing to kind of take on these topics. We'll have to see, and we'll match the approach to every group, but it's an important topic.
Linda, do you have any questions?
No.
Thank you.
Talked enough about death. Thanks very much.
Well, I do think maybe the term, we can kind of repackage it in a kind of a more optimistic fashion.
Well, that's an interesting thing that's taking place now. I mean, one of our speakers is, Caitlin Doty is the mortician. She's 32 years old. Her practice in Los Angeles is called Undertaking LA. And she's prominent on YouTube with Ask a Mortician series. She's got a New York Times bestseller book out, but she's part of an overall way of thinking, or a changing way of thinking, called Death Positive, which isn't so much to be like in your face, blah, blah, death, but more going back to what happened in Concord 150 years ago. Someone got sick, the community came together, the family came together, they cared for them in the home, the family was supported, the wake and funeral arose from the home, et cetera. So in a lot of ways, that's what we're moving back to, where death is a natural part of life.
Many of us with pets have to deal with the pets passing on. And,
Absolutely.
It's kind of an experience that teaches children and
Absolutely,
teaches
yes.
all kind of.
Oftentimes, the first way that children learn about loss is loss of a pet. So,
thank you very much.
thanks very much for your interest.
Anybody else have? I guess we are now ready for committee liaison report. Linda, do you have any you'd like to add?
No, thank you.
Okay, Mike?
I attended the light board meeting. As usual, very active, interesting, talking about rates, still trying to balance this very complicated problem of wanting folks to be conserving, on the other hand, encouraging people to move to electricity that can be done with a lower carbon footprint. So balance how you encourage conservation and how you also encourage people to move to this form of electricity or a form of energy. It's an interesting thing, a lot of challenges, so a good meeting.
A lot of my committees are actually meeting this week, and the one I'm getting very interested in that I wanted to note, because I'm still hoping to see the same level of activity generated on the Concord Center end, is the West Concord Cultural Advisory Committee, and they also have another meeting coming up this week. And it's exciting to see the amount of energy moving forward I'm going to just assume it's there in Concord Center. It just hasn't formalized and that's, people are busy. But the specific committee I wanted to liaison report on is the Historic Districts Commission, and draw our attention to the Districts Commission focus on expanding the historic district in Concord. I have shared with the board 3 documents that Heather Gill provided with me today. These will be in front of the Historic Districts Commission on Thursday. So this they haven't been voted. They're not surprised, as they've been in draft for a while. With specific focus tonight and to anyone who is listening, to note that there's going to be a historic district expansion survey going out. And this survey is going to go out specifically to homeowners, the homeowners that are in houses that have been determined to be one of the phases of proposed district expansion. And I should back up and say, one of the reasons that the commission is looking at this is so that homes aren't, or districts aren't expanded in a last-ditch effort to save a specific house, but rather to be methodical and look at expanding, over a period of time. I don't want to steal the thunder from Thursday night by going into too much detail, but there'll be a map available, and it's available on the website now, that describe stages and phases of this expansion. Some of the houses, and this was an interesting sidebar conversation I had today, some of the houses will be listed are not particularly historic, but they're in a historic district, and the change in that house would affect its neighbors and the flavor of the neighborhood. And so, again, in a district, you're going to have a number of different ages of homes. And the other point of note up until is to remember that right now, the only form, we can all think about houses. For instance, when you see the map, you'll see houses listed for inclusion that I would have assumed were already part of a historic district. They're named antique homes, but they're not at this point included, which means the only thing that keeps that house from being wildly changed is the present owners, because short of a complete removal and a demolition, there's nothing to stop that from happening. And since, as we know from the long-range plan, one of the absolute highest priorities that has come back to us from every town survey is our historic nature, and preserving that. I commend the district commission for generating a progressive plan on this versus waiting to see something change and panicking over what that could mean. So, those of you whose interest has been piqued, go to the Historic Districts Commission meeting on Thursday. And those of you who are in any of these proposed areas, I don't know when the letter is going to go out that will include the survey, but check your mail. And if something comes from the town, don't assume that that's something that you can resolve with your waste pile. So, yeah.
Well, it's apropos for this evening, with Mr. Susi here. I attended the cemetery committee, and it's a great committee, and they do really good work.
I
They
enjoyed
have
that.
finalized the cemetery master plan, of which there's going to be a public hearing, a public discussion sometime in November to get public input about what are the areas of interest that people are now looking for an expansion of the Sleepy Hollow Cemetery, or mostly Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. As people have come to the end of life, things are changing about what they want as a resting place, or do they want to be buried? Do they want to be in a columbarium? Things that this cemetery was not designed for when it was acquired by the town. So there'll be an open public forum to get input about what's the vision for how you would like to be cared for after you're gone.
And has the mausoleum or the structure ever moved forward in?
That's part of this discussion.
I was imagining it would be.
That's part of the discussion, is whether there's a request for a mausoleum.
Yeah.
So these are all part of the discussions that'll happen. The date has not been set, but it's sometime in November. I also attended the Minuteman Vocational Technical High School Building Committee. And of note on this, yes, they're still on schedule and on budget. That is subject to change, unfortunately. The National Grid strike is having an impact on large construction projects across the Commonwealth. And the project had had slated to use National Grid's power lines, its natural gas supply, for winter warming of the building, because now the building is almost all enclosed. It's considerably different from when we last looked at it. The building is now has its envelope. Some of the finish touches are done in the exterior of the building, and as they button up the building for the winter work, it needs to be warm enough to be able to do the work inside the building. They were going to use National Grid. The strike is looking like it, unless it ends within the next 2 weeks, the project will be put on hold. And have to look for an alternative source of supply to warm the building. And so they're actively looking at what's available. And unfortunately, some of them are not as good at options as National Grid, because natural gas is a lot cleaner than, say, diesel generators that keep it warm, or propane. So, as of today, on budget, on time, but as of the end of August, we'll see where we go. There's no information about
Heat pumps, right?
Well, if you put in heat
I'm
pumps, whatever you do, this is a temporary warming, through the construction project. You're gonna work in cold weather, so that's a big discussion. We're meeting again in 2 weeks.
NPR had a story about the strike. Said that the current strike is 8 weeks long, and the last time the strike lasted 17 weeks.
Oh,
So
wow.
it doesn't necessarily mean anything particular, but it didn't sound as if it was getting closer.
According to this meeting, there were meetings today at National Grid. You received a letter from National Grid informing us about.
We had a meeting with their district representative, two folks, and we got a letter from the CEO who lives in Concord, describing that exactly what their collective bargaining issues are and sort of the company's perspective on that. And the fact that they are management personnel and contractors are performing the class 1 work that needs to get done, but the other things not so much. We're concerned about Cambridge Turnpike because there's a big gas aspect to that.
I attended the joint school committee meeting on August 7th. There was a discussion regarding the fire at the school and the response by the town. They were very pleased with the fire department's response. And then there was discussion and vote to approve the authorization of the borrowing and warrant articles for the special town meeting. And the issue of coordinating with Carlisle in terms of how that is going to operate. And that was a fairly brief meeting, so I was able to also attend the Dog Park Feasibility Study Committee. And they had a detailed review of their preliminary report, which will be filed by September 4th. And then on the 9th, the Committee on Disability had two guests. Laurie Lavoli, the building commissioner, discussed her role in working to have buildings ADA compliant, and how that kind of whole process and how their operations work in terms of when they were involved and when they might not be involved. And Laurie Capone, the Assistant Director of Natural Resource Commission, discussed the accessible trail and the Mass Office of Disability Grants, and provided a map of the various trails that they have and what they're trying to do in terms of which ones are easier to make compliant, and then which ones they're still working on but will take a little bit of time. And then there was also discussion regarding liaison with the Council on Aging and lock boxes, dealing with, so that if the police come and somebody is disabled or in a position where they're unable to go and unlock the door, people don't have to break in the door, that there would be a mechanism where the keys would be available to the emergency personnel. Yeah. Council on Aging does it now, and it sounds like a very good program, and something that, again, I think the public safety issue that they're looking at. So those were all interesting committees and meetings and progress being made. Do we have any
Two.
miscellaneous? Okay.
I have two. One is a reminder that Ag Day is coming up, September 8th, on Main Street. And the reason for bringing it up here tonight is not only a plug for Ag Day, but also we're gonna have a booth, we're gonna be there, and
Isn't that where we usually collect a lot of green cards? We've always been very, very good.
well, it's just a good chance to be physically present and when we're not here, and so I'm hoping we will, I know you said you have a conflict that day, but I'm certainly around, and I hope we can do that.
Yep.
So you
People
say,
with green thumbs will come and fill out green cards.
oh,
Sorry.
very bad. So bad. So bad you should have to come regardless.
The second item is, I briefly mentioned to you that we have this, we have two opportunities in town to assist folks who need financial assistance with taxes. One is the Tax Relief Committee, and the other is the Senior Tax Relief bylaw that we passed a couple of years ago, which has now gone into effect. And I would remind everybody that the deadline for applications is coming up September 1st. So, you know, you get your application in. If you know somebody who should apply for this, please encourage them. The issue, though, is if someone is eligible for the senior tax relief, which it can be a substantial amount of money, are they still eligible for financial assistance from the Tax Relief Committee? So the issue that for me is not so much the answer to that question, I think it's important, but the answer is who is it that decides
Right.
that question? And I know the Tax Relief Committee has a point of view, the Hugh Cargill Trust Committee has a point of view, the assessor probably has a point of view. So I'd ask Chris if we could be in touch with town council to have him look at the various charters of these committees and give us an opinion as to whose responsibility it is to make a decision about that.
Yeah.
I can, if you're willing to do that, I can convey that to the Hugh Cargill Trust Committee, meets tomorrow, and let them know that that process is underway.
Great. Yep, I will, and Mina will be out here next Wednesday at 3:30 to review the warrant, so it might be an opportunity to talk with him. But I'll let him know
You might let him know, because you might have to actually review
the documents.
the charters, the documents of the various committees.
But you brought that up.
Yeah, we need to get it resolved.
Anybody else?
Well, I received a letter that was hand-delivered to my house, actually for Chris, which I brought.
Hand to your house for Chris?
And it's a discussion, and Andrew will circulate it in the clip, but it's really bringing up the level of traffic and the experience of this one member of town. It was worth noting because I've been stopped in it by a number of folks in West Concord specifically, both because of the traffic coming from the construction, but just in general fears about how the impact of any of the developments that are underway are going to further congest an area that's already pretty much, well, as a bicyclist, I get to most things much faster than my friends who I pass. And that clearly isn't a very, while I strongly recommend trying the bicycle, I'm not suggesting it should replace the car for those who want to use them. And it's impacting people who want to go from, for instance, West Concord to Concord, who live in Concord and they can't get from point A to point B in a reasonable amount of time because through traffic is bottlenecking. And I can explain to folks that obviously we don't control 62, we don't control certain roadways, but we do. This is our town, and looking at how Waze moves people through town.
Software.
The how the different algorithms are impacting us.
Now, did this person have suggestions, or was it more?
No, interestingly, it rarely comes with and I've got a solution. But
I would urge those who write letters, that's always something we look for.
Is this something that the traffic management group looks at when they do these construction projects? Is this an ongoing problem or time limited because of the road construction? Because I worry that as we look forward into developing the Giroux land, if we look forward to the cultural districts holding events and bringing people into West Concord, what's the push-pull in how we manage growth in West Concord?
Well, the writer objected to a couple specific things, such as setbacks from side crosswalks. So
The
that
blind
this
spots
person was
that are
saying, if
created.
people park right up against the bars in the crosswalk, you can't see the pedestrians stepping in. And the other thing was the double parking on Comm Ave in front of Woods Hill Table. They said there's barely enough enough room for 2 cars to be parked on either side and people to travel. And if anybody opens the door, it's going to get ripped off. So so there was some specific concerns there, but then also the general concern that so the traffic management group would look at any specific recommendation or concern, but the bigger issue of how the apps are directing people off to get off of Route 2 and cut through neighborhood streets, that's a bigger challenge. But they are looking at, they've received a request from a number of streets to that there be no left turn or no certain turning movements be restricted, and they're asking a traffic engineer to take a look at the possibility of having some time within, like there's no left coming out of Kai's Road if entering onto Main Street from 7 a.m. to 9 or something like that.
Highland in West
and
Concord has
So there's a number of streets that have, residents have requested that turning movements be limited to cut down on the cut-through traffic that's happening, so they're looking at that. It's not an overall solution, but at least they're starting to look at some of those, like the Neshotic Road area.
Right.
Waze is directing people to they can bypass Route 2 by going through the Neshotic Road area and jumping back on at Crosby's Corner.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we're all
It's more
experiencing it.
difficult to manage on the larger roads like Lowell Road, but, other communities have changed the road use. And when you put in those time constraints, no left turn from 7 to 9, it takes it out of Waze for the peak traffic times. Because they look at all that data. Or I know a community changed one-way streets for certain hours of a day just to avoid. Right.
So I think we need to look at some of those.
Look at that, okay.
It's a never get complaints for too many signs.
Right.
Right, it's true.
Anybody else? Linda, did you have anything?
Nothing else?
Okay, committee nominations and appointments, or none?
Okay, committee nominations?
So we have the names of the Climate Action Advisory Board. We have not quite a full group, but Nick Pappas has been recommended by the Public Works Commission, Brian Folds, formerly of the Energy Futures Task Force, Pam Hill, also formerly of the Energy Futures Task Force, John Bolduc, Jake Swenson, Ruthie Bennett, Michael McIntyre, and Warren Leon have all volunteered to serve. These appointments are made by the town manager, subject to the approval of the select board. So if you're ready, I respectfully request your confirmation of the appointment of those names to the Climate Action Advisory Committee. And that will leave 3 more seats.
It's just a town manager appointment, it's not the select board.
Okay.
It's just the town manager.
It's just the
appointment.
town manager.
They're just announcing those
So
appointments.
just announcing those appointments.
Thank you for making those appointments.
Andrew?
So are you nominating them, or you're?
So I don't know, I've received conflicting information about whose appointment this is, but if it's just the town manager,
here.
I don't normally nominate them, I just inform the board.
It's,
And it doesn't require,
Appointed by the town manager.
so,
Not subject to select board. There you go. Lawyers.
We're out of the loop.
Great, good
and
job.
then there'll be 3 more seats to be filled, and we do have several
What's the
volunteers.
total number?
11?
11, right. Good.
Terrific, thank you.
Great.
So do we move to
Thank you, Alice.
No, we don't have to.
No, no reason.
Just he's informing us.
Do you feel sort of left out? I kind of feel gypped.
I'm gonna, aye.
Agree.
I think we're now ready to adjourn to executive session.
Okay, so I move to adjourn the select board meeting to executive session for the purposes of discussing litigation along Estabrook Road and not to convene an open session. The executive session included private discussions affecting litigation on the state matter.
Second.
Linda, vote?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
And Linda, as I mentioned before, this is a session that you were not able to do by telephone.
Correct.
Good night, and thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.